She had no idea her quiet night shift at a local diner would change her life forever. The moment she slipped the check into the hands of a well-dressed millionaire, a chill ran down her spine. He wasn't just some rich customer. He was in trouble. Dangerous trouble. "You're being set up," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the restaurant. His eyes locked onto hers, panic flickering before he wiped it away, but it was too late. The wheels were already in motion. What followed was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The grand chandelier overhead cast a warm, almost ethereal glow as Elena moved through the sprawling marble foyer of her mansion. Every inch of the estate screamed success. Opulent decor, expensive art adorning the walls, and polished floors that reflected the image of the woman who had built it all. At 32, she was everything people aspired to be. A self-made millionaire, a business mogul, and a celebrity in her own right. The house was her sanctuary, her fortress. Yet, as Elena ran her fingers across the polished wooden railing of the staircase, her eyes wandered toward the large windows, the city lights glittering below. From here, the world seemed small, a distant memory of a life she had long left behind. She had worked tirelessly for this, she knew that. Every sleepless night, every deal brokered in dark offices, every sacrifice made. She had earned this life. But tonight, something felt off, a nagging sensation that she couldn't quite shake. As her assistant, Maya, approached with another stack of paperwork, Elena put on her best smile. "I'll be downstairs in a moment," she said, her voice steady. But there was an unease in her eyes, one Maya didn't notice. Not yet. Elena turned toward the massive fireplace, where the flames flickered with a warmth that seemed out of place, given the chill in the air that hung around her heart. This life, this success, it had come with a price. The question she always asked herself was, had it been worth it? She didn't have an answer yet, but something told her that tonight, that answer would be forced out of her. Elena stood in the corner of her office, the high-rise windows offering a breathtaking view of the city below. Yet, her attention was fixated on the small group gathered in the center of the room, people she thought she could trust. Her business partners, her closest allies. But as their hushed voices reached her ears, something wasn't right. She couldn't pinpoint it, but there was an unsettling sharpness in their tone. "Once the deal goes through, it'll be a clean break," said Jason, her CFO, his voice slick with confidence. He leaned in close to Olivia, the lawyer she'd known for years, the one who had guided her through every contract, every negotiation. But tonight, Elena saw something in their eyes, something she couldn't ignore. It was more than just business. It was a plot. Jason continued, unaware of Elena's presence behind the door. "She trusts me. She's practically handed us the keys to everything. She thinks I'm her friend. But the moment she's out of the picture, we're untouchable. The company will be ours." Olivia's laugh was soft, almost cruel. "It's too easy. She's been too trusting. And the public, they'll eat up the story. A scandal. A fall from grace. We can frame her for everything. No one will see it coming." Elena's breath caught in her throat. Frame me? She wasn't just hearing about a hostile takeover. No, this was a betrayal, a conspiracy to ruin her life, her empire. A whisper of panic rushed through her, but she clamped it down. "I'm not going to let this happen." Just as the weight of their conversation settled like a cold shadow in the room, a sudden noise broke the tension. A faint knock on the door. At the far end of the hallway, a quiet observer stood. Kyle, a young waiter who had worked for Elena in various capacities over the years, had come to drop off some paperwork for Maya. He had always admired Elena from a distance, seeing her as a symbol of success, someone who had transcended every obstacle. But tonight, as he passed by the office door, he overheard something he shouldn't have. He froze, his hand hovering midair as he processed what he'd just heard. They were plotting against her? His heart raced, a heavy weight settling in his chest. Kyle wasn't the type to get involved in anything dangerous. He kept to himself, worked quietly, and stayed out of trouble. But this was something else. This wasn't just a corporate betrayal. This was danger. He stood there, hidden in the shadows, his mind racing. What could he do? If they found out he knew, if they knew he overheard them, there would be no way he'd escape their wrath. His palms grew clammy as the reality of the situation dawned on him. He couldn't just walk away. Elena needed to know, but how could he warn her without becoming a target himself? The decision wasn't a choice anymore. Kyle's body trembled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. If he didn't act now, it would be too late. Kyle's hand trembled as he turned to leave, his mind spinning with the implications of what he had just learned. But as he took a step toward the door, he froze. Elena was standing right in front of him. Her face was calm, but there was something unsettling in her eyes, like she had known all along. And then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, she said, "You heard them, didn't you?" Kyle's blood ran cold. Jordan had always considered himself a man of integrity. He wasn't someone who got involved in corporate drama or political schemes. But when he overheard the conversation between Jason and Olivia, everything changed. He knew something wasn't right the moment they mentioned Elena's name, but hearing the full extent of their plan left him paralyzed with fear. His fingers trembled as he gripped the edge of the countertop, the conversation playing on a loop in his mind. Frame her. Destroy everything she's built. Make her a villain. They were planning to ruin the woman who had given him a job, a purpose. He had worked as Elena's head mechanic for 3 years, handling all her high-end cars, making sure every vehicle ran flawlessly. He'd always admired her strength, her ambition. But now he was hearing that they wanted to kill her career. And worse, from what he could gather, their plan was far from innocent. It involved her car, her beloved sports car, one she drove every day. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Should I warn her? Jordan's first instinct was to walk away, to pretend he hadn't heard anything and bury his head in the sand. But something inside him screamed, if I don't do something, she's going to be in danger. He hadn't just overheard a business plot. He had stumbled upon a conspiracy that could cost someone their life. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure what to do. When Jordan finally stood before Elena, a storm raged inside him. His palms were sweaty, his heart pounding in his chest. She looked every bit the image of power, sitting in her sleek leather chair, her polished nails tapping a rhythm against the desk. He wanted to believe it wasn't true, that everything would be fine, that he was overreacting. But deep down, he knew. He had to tell her. "Elena, I need to talk to you," Jordan said, his voice trembling. She raised an eyebrow, her sharp eyes narrowing in on him. "What's this about? You're shaking, Jordan. I don't like that look in your eyes. Something's going on. Something big. I overheard Jason and Olivia talking. They're planning something. Something to take you down." Elena's expression shifted from calm curiosity to skepticism. "What are you talking about? Jason and Olivia are trusted colleagues." Jordan shook his head, frustration growing. "I know what I heard. They're not who you think they are. They're planning to frame you for—" "Elena," Maya interrupted, walking into the room with a stack of files in her arms. "We have a meeting in 10. Elena glanced at Maya and then back at Jordan. "I don't have time for this right now." Jordan's resolve faltered. "She doesn't believe me." He stood frozen in the doorway as Elena dismissed him with a wave of her hand. His heart sank. What if he was too late? What if they were already one step ahead? The pit of his stomach twisted with dread. But Jordan wasn't about to give up. He spent the next several hours in the garage, where Elena's prized car was parked. Every tool he needed was within reach, but as he carefully checked the brakes, just like he had so many times before, his hands froze. Something wasn't right. The brake pads had been tampered with. The bolts had been loosened, the wiring frayed, as though someone had intentionally set the car up to fail. His breath hitched in his throat. It's all true. They're trying to kill her. The evidence was undeniable. He ran his fingers over the tampered brake lines, his heart racing. If Elena drove that car tomorrow, she wouldn't stand a chance. She'd be on the road, trusting her car to work flawlessly, and it would betray her at the worst possible moment. Jordan stood back, his pulse hammering in his ears. This wasn't just a business betrayal anymore, it was murder. The weight of the decision hit him like a ton of bricks. He couldn't let it happen. He couldn't be the one to sit idly by. But how could he stop it without putting himself in the crosshairs? He needed to warn her. He needed to make sure she didn't get behind that wheel. The garage door closed behind him with a heavy thud, sealing his fate. He didn't have much time. Jason and Olivia were already playing their game, and soon it would be too late. Jordan's phone buzzed in his pocket. An unknown number. It was Elena. "Jordan, I think I'm being followed. Are you sure you can trust everyone in this building?" Her voice trembled. His heart skipped. She knew. She knew it was coming. And just like that, the first domino fell. The air in Elena's office was thick with tension as Jason and Olivia stood across from her, their expressions unreadable. Jordan had led her here, his eyes filled with urgency as he pulled her aside, whispering in a low voice, "They tampered with your car. The brakes, Elena. It's all part of their plan to set you up." Elena's stomach dropped. The brakes? She had driven that car this morning, with no idea that it could have been the last time. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she tried to keep her voice steady as she faced Jason and Olivia. "I know everything. she said, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. You two think you've won. You think I won't find out, but you were careless. Jason's eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. Elena, you've misunderstood. He began, his voice shaking ever so slightly. This isn't what you think. No, Elena interjected, her voice unwavering. You don't get to lie anymore. I know everything. The car, the frame-up, the conspiracy. You planned to destroy me, and you almost succeeded. Her eyes moved to Olivia, whose smug expression faltered under the weight of Elena's words. Olivia scoffed, stepping forward. You think you're in control, don't you? But this is bigger than you, Elena. You were always just the stepping stone. All we wanted was control, and now you're standing in our way. She paused, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something almost like regret in her eyes. You were never supposed to find out. The words hung in the air, and Elena could feel the sharp sting of betrayal in every syllable. Her hands clenched into fists, but she held her ground, her voice calm and steady. I'm not the only one who found out. You're not getting away with this. Jordan stepped forward now, pulling the small, seemingly insignificant object from his pocket. The tampered brake part, a small piece of metal that had been deliberately altered. His hand shook, but he held it up for all to see. I found this in your car, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. You thought no one would notice, but I did. And I'm not the only one. Jason's face went white as Olivia's eyes flicked nervously toward the door. They knew it was over. The evidence was irrefutable and there was no way out. Elena's eyes never left Jason and Olivia as she reached for her phone, her fingers tapping furiously. Within moments, the authorities arrived, the sirens cutting through the air like a final, inevitable verdict. Jason tried to speak, to justify his actions, but his voice faltered as the officers cuffed him. His attempts to explain, to convince them that it was just business, fell on deaf ears. Olivia stood frozen, her face pale, as the truth of their betrayal settled like a heavy weight in the room. She, too, was handcuffed, her smug demeanor completely gone. No one had expected Elena to uncover their plot. Least of all, Elena herself. As Jason was led out of the room, he turned back toward Elena, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You don't know what you're doing, he spat, his voice laced with venom. This isn't over. We'll destroy you yet. Elena's lips curled into a cold, determined smile. You already tried, but I'm not going down that easily. As the door slammed shut behind them, Elena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The betrayal was over. The danger had passed. But she knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The truth had come out, and with it, her resolve. She was more than just a woman who built a life from nothing. She was a woman who would fight to keep it, no matter the cost. As the police took Jason and Olivia away in handcuffs, their faces pale and defeated, Elena stood on the steps of her mansion, watching the night unfold. Her heart had calmed, but the weight of the betrayal still sat heavy on her chest. For years, Elena had been driven by ambition, success, and the belief that the world could be molded by her sheer will. She had trusted the people around her, trusted Jason, trusted Olivia, but in the end, they had only seen her as a means to their own end. How could I have been so blind? She had built empires, negotiated with giants, but it was the people closest to her who had betrayed her most. Trust was fragile, Elena realized. It wasn't enough to surround yourself with those who only wanted what you could give them. Loyalty, true loyalty, was rarer than she had ever imagined. As the sirens faded into the night, she sighed deeply. The betrayal stung, but she knew that it was a lesson she had to learn. Trust had to be earned, not given freely. And the people who truly had her back weren't always the ones who stood closest to her. Sometimes they were the ones who came out of nowhere. Jordan was still standing nearby, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes avoiding hers. He had done the right thing, but he looked uncomfortable in the aftermath of it all. Elena approached him, her footsteps steady but purposeful. He glanced up, a nervous tension in his shoulders, as if he expected her to dismiss him or thank him out of obligation. But Elena didn't say a word about gratitude. Instead, she gave him a knowing look, the kind that spoke of unspoken understanding. "You did more than save my life tonight," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You proved something to me that I hadn't seen before. Loyalty is worth more than any fortune." Jordan shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, this kind of validation. But Elena continued, her eyes locking onto his with a quiet intensity. "I want you to come work for me, not just as a mechanic but as a partner. I know you've got more in you than just fixing cars." Jordan's mouth went dry. "Partner? Me? Are you sure about this?" Elena smiled softly, the weight of everything that had happened settling in her chest. "I've seen a lot of things in my life, Jordan. But you're the one who actually had my back when no one else did. You're more valuable than you know." For the first time that night, Jordan's tense posture loosened. He straightened, the weight of his decision lifting from his shoulders. He had chosen the right side. And now, Elena was offering him a future that he never thought possible. As they stood together on the balcony, watching the first rays of sunlight stretch across the horizon, Elena couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope rise in her chest. The night had been long, and the betrayal had been sharp, but now, it was over. She had made it through the storm, and with new allies, new purpose. Maybe second chances didn't come in the ways you expected. Maybe the world had a way of testing you, of stripping away the things you thought were unshakable. But in the end, it was how you rebuilt that mattered. And in that moment, Elena knew that the most important thing she had wasn't her fortune or her empire. It was the people who had proven themselves worthy of her trust. Jordan looked over at her, his face breaking into a grin. "So what now?" Elena chuckled softly, her eyes gleaming with a new sense of resolve. "Now we build something better." The sun rose higher, and for the first time in a long while, Elena felt a true sense of peace. Second chances, after all, were worth more than anything money could buy. And with unexpected allies at her side, she was ready to face whatever came next.